This is Ashana Patel, and I'm an animal science major at the University of Maryland. And this is Kathleen Tabor, and she is an equine lawyer. And we are
Tabor.
going Tabor, and we are going to ask her a few interview questions about her career. So the first one is, what does a typical day of work involve for you?
So it's a little different for me, probably than some attorneys. I'm a solo practitioner, which means I work by myself. I don't have any support staff. When I do need support staff, I have to hire them. So my typical day will vary because there's some days I'm just doing administrative work, which is my bookkeeping and billing and record keeping and all that. Other days, some long days can be just client work, a lot of drafting. There's emails to answer, phone calls. But for the most part, I like it because it varies.
So how many clients do you usually see in a day, and do the issues tend to vary, or do you see a more common one?
Okay, so I have been a solo practitioner since day one. So I've always worked out of my home. So the only time clients really come to my office, which I do have them sometimes, is if they just don't have a location for me to meet them at. But typically I end up going to the farms or to their homes even. I will do a lot of business organization, a lot of contract work. I do a lot of business advice. I help profits and nonprofit organizations with their startup and with their goal setting and their paperwork. I also will do wills and estates and some other variety of issues that might come up for my clients. Some of my clients are more long-term than others. Some people just hire me just to do a quick contract. Others keep me on a retainer because they want me to do work for them on a whole variety of issues.
Are these contracts more like leasing contracts or like exchanges of the horse property?
So the contracts will often vary. Usually we start out with getting their businesses formed or getting their businesses up to date. There's a lot of documentation that's required to really formalize a business in the state of Maryland. And then it'll be boarding contracts, training contracts, leasing lessons, all kinds of leases, free lease, half lease, full lease, sales. I also will do help people with their disputes. So sometimes it'll settle the settlement agreement contract that we need to go through. And then some of them, because many of my clients have larger, it really varies, the variety, but some of them with larger farms might be leasing out part of their property to farmers for crop growth. I've done cell tower leases, I've done solar leases, I like what I do because it's never the same.
So going off of that, have you seen a change in the cases now versus 5 or maybe even 10 years ago?
So I've been doing this for 16 years now, and what I've seen change, which I've been beating the drum from day one, get everything in writing, is that horse people are becoming more savvy with their knowledge and need for contracts. And so I've done many seminars, I've written a book, I've written articles, and I try to educate the community at large that a contract is a good thing because it puts everything in writing, the rights and responsibilities of both parties or all parties involved, what your expectations are. And then I also include, because I was a trained mediator while I was still in law school, I also put in a mediation clause so that you have a dispute resolution in your contract so that you're not feeling like you have to rush off to court. So I've been very successful in keeping my clients out of court for the most part.
So you think that like overall that's basically helped you stay out of like bigger disputes because of the mediation thing? Is that something that you've seen people do a lot of, or is it something that you thought worked really well?
Mediation works in a sense that a lot of lawyers don't like to do mediation, so they're more willing to settle. Um, they're small issues that could become big issues stay small. But the important thing to me, especially in the equine world, is that it's a small community. Whether, even if you just have your horse and your business here in Maryland, the likelihood is you're going to be in Florida or Kentucky or New York or some other place, and you're going to, Delaware, you're going to cross paths with other people. And I feel like if you know up front how you're going to resolve your disputes, you can have a more amicable relationship with people, and you can preserve those relationships that are important to you.
So what do you think the biggest challenge you have faced as specifically an equine lawyer?
Probably the few times I've had to go into court is educating the judges. Horses are considered property, and people who are involved with horses don't see them as property. There's a huge emotional attachment. And so I have to help my clients understand the perspective that the courts are coming from. And then I try my best to help the judges understand why the issue that's before them is important and deserves, a day in court.
So how did you decide that this was the career path for you? And can you briefly go over the steps that brought you to this decision and like how you became confident in yourself to be an equine lawyer?
Okay, so I grew up with horses. I started riding when I was about 5, and I had horses as a young girl. I was never a competitive rider. I was always a pleasure rider, but I've always appreciated the vast variety of horse and activities in the equine industry. So if you were to see my office, you would see lots of pictures of race horses and sport horses, and some of my clients have sent me pictures of their horses when they've been successful. So getting to what brought me here was that was my passion. And so I'm in my 60s now, so I went to law school in my 40s. I originally was going to go to law school when I was in my 20s, but other things became more important in school at the time. And I was going to go into environmental law. By the time I was ready to go to law school, I thought, because I had been an education lobbyist, I thought I'd do education law. But when I walked into the law schools that I was considering applying to, I saw this flyer on a kiosk that said, brown bag lunch, equine law. It stopped me in my tracks because I had never heard of that before. So that's when I started exploring it. And at that time in Maryland, I could only find like 3 attorneys who did anything with equine law. And I'm really happy to say that, and I've made a big push in my within my colleagues, my legal world, of getting more people to focus on the issues of the equine industry. So there's probably a couple dozen now in Maryland that will say they do equine law.
So what did you find was the most rewarding about being an equine lawyer?
I get to choose my clients. I get to see a lot of the beautiful country of Maryland. I get to see a lot of gorgeous horses. And I like to be immersed in this. So instead of horses just being a hobby, it's a profession. And I just feel blessed that I get a chance to merge those two together. And so between wanting to help people and loving horses, I think I'm a pretty fortunate person.
So how many hours in a day do you find yourself actively working? And did you expect this before you started actually becoming a lawyer?
So they will tell you in law school, you don't think of it as a daily thing, it's a weekly. And they tell you when you come out of law school to expect to work 60 to 80 hours a week. Usually you're working for a law firm. They're looking for billable hours. And it's a lot of work to get started. I interviewed a few places before, after I left law school, while I was waiting for my exam results to come in. And I quickly came to a realization, if I was going to work 60 to 80 hours, especially in my 40s at my age, and I had a family, I was going to do it for myself. So my husband was very gracious about it and gave me the seed money to set up my law office. And so from day one, I've worked it. And yes, probably 60 to 80 hours was not unusual at the beginning. The nice thing is now I can work anywhere during the 20 to 40 hours a week. And I can take time off when I want to, because again, I get to choose my clients and the cases that I take. And so my life is my own.
So kind of bouncing back just a little bit, I know that you mentioned that you never knew equine law was a thing. When you were going into the industry of law, you said you were focusing on environmental law. So do you ever think, like now you said you do agriculture as well.
Mm-hmm.
So did you ever think like this was an occupation you're going to have like when you were young from the get-go, or is it something you slowly developed, like I want to work with agricultural law?
Well, like I said, I grew up in rural Michigan, and my grandfather was a farm. When one of my grandfathers was a farmer, my families were farmers. So I've always had a great appreciation for agriculture. And so the environment at the time when I was originally going to be going to law school, the only option, there was no agriculture law either at that time, was just environmental law. It's really meshed together. So I'm really fortunate that I get to do, I get to apply a lot of my knowledge and my experiences to my field. So yeah, it's a good way to go.
So what made you move from Michigan, you said, to Maryland? Like, how did this become your home base?
Oh my gosh, that was 20 some years ago, and that's a long story. But I used to be a lobbyist for public education, and things were changing in Michigan quite a bit at that time. And so I sought out my career interests in the Washington D.C. and quickly discovered that I didn't like the D.C. scene, and when we had located here to Maryland, so I could be working in D.C. And so when I had the opportunity to go back to law school, that's when I, knew I was going to. This was going to be my home base.
Gotcha. Do you think the salary of an equine lawyer is reasonable? And did this ever influence your decision to go into the field, or does it change it now that you're actually in the field?
It was never an influence. I learned a long time ago that if you're driven by money, you're not going to be happy. So, in fact, when I finally came to my husband to say I wanted to start my own law firm, I said to him, "Do you mind being married to a poor lawyer?" And of course he said yes. But I make a good enough salary to survive. I pay, I can keep my business running and take care of things I need to take care of for myself. If you work for a law firm, you, as an equine attorney, you might be lucky enough to, they may have a division in their law firm dedicated to equine law. You'll see that more in like Kentucky, Florida, New York, California. You'll see law firms more like that. But more often than not, you're going to see attorneys who do equine law actually working like insurance or land use, those kind of bankruptcy, that kind of stuff. And then their equine practice is kind of a supplemental. So mine's a primary, and I'm one of the few attorneys who it is a primary focus, and I'm one of the few solos. I know this only because of the annual equine law conference in Kentucky that I usually attend. Of course, we didn't this year because of COVID, but it's it's a good way to meet a lot of people who do equine law around the country too.
So do you think going into this field actually made you more involved in the horse industry, or do you think it took time away from you doing, like you were saying, like being involved with riding, or obviously not when you were older, but just in general?
Well, my personal time with horses, it took time away. I had a horse, I had a beautiful Morgan that eventually I had to sell because I just, at the time that I had him, I was seeing him maybe once or twice a month, and I was letting other people ride him because he needs to be ridden. But I'm more involved in industry. I sit on the Maryland Horse Industry Board. I've been involved with the Maryland Horse Council. Those are two separate entities. Been involved, I sit on different nonprofit equine groups on their boards or advisory boards. So I'm probably more involved. I'm pretty much immersed in it.
Do you regret that you can't spend your more personal time with horses, or would or do you think that's like a necessary sacrifice for you being immersed into the horse industry?
That's a really good question, because there's times when it makes me really sad, because I used to also drive carriage horses. I did that as a part-time job in Philadelphia and then Baltimore City. But the neat thing is in the 16 years of my business, a lot of my clients have become really good friends. And so there's times when I'm invited, come out and drive carriage with us, or come on out and let's go trail riding. So I get that, I do get the opportunity, and so it's kind of a side benefit. And yeah, I kind of wish sometimes I could do it more, but I really enjoy helping other horse people be successful in whatever it is that they want to achieve.
So my final question would be, how would you recommend others to be able to become an equine lawyer successfully? Like, what are the steps you think that they should take and all of that?
Well, the first thing I would say is find a mentor. Regardless if you're doing equine law or any law, you find an attorney who's experienced and is willing to just give you some good guidance and you know, ideas of where you're going to be going with it. You need to have a plan. You need to know, am I going to be a solo practitioner? Am I going to be in a small firm? Am I going to be a partner with somebody? Am I going to seek a job in a larger firm? And work that plan. My motto on my website is, a goal without a plan is just a wish. And I really believe that. You need, if you're going to be in the equine industry, you need to know the intricacies of the equine industry and the myriad of issues. I mean, there's, in Maryland alone, I think we have 35 different breeds and numerous disciplines. I mean, we have more horses per square mile in Maryland than any other state. So there's a variety of horse issues. So you need to know your subject. You need to be involved. Network. Coming from Michigan to Maryland, no one knew me. So before I even graduated from law school, I had joined as a member of the Maryland Horse Council, so I could start meeting people who were involved in industry, which is how I was then asked by the governor to be a member of the Maryland Horse Industry Board. You need to always continue to educate yourself too, not just on legal issues, but on the industry, because it's always changing. And so it's just be willing to be involved, put the time in.
So if you are giving this advice to somebody who is very involved in the horse industry currently, like they are very passionate about it in terms of they ride a lot, what kind of sacrifices or advice would you give them in terms of like what their future entails, like hidden things that they might not be aware of when coming into the industry?
Initially, you're going to have very little private time, and it's going to be hard because you want to be so successful. It's going to be really difficult to cut that time out. But it's so important that you do it. So for instance, the steps that I started taking is that my office is at one of our spare bedrooms, and I have a lock on the door. It's a whole separate, nobody comes in here unless they're, you know, they need me as an attorney. So when I'm in this room, I'm doing my work. When I go out that door, I shut the door. and I'm done. Now, the difficulty over time that I've learned with cell phones, particularly in texting, is that clients feel like they can text you day or night. And believe me, I get 4 a.m. text messages. I've learned to turn my phone off. I've learned to put messages on my phone and my email saying, this is when my office is closed and I'm not available. The good thing is I don't do criminal work, for one thing. So I don't have any real emergencies. I do a little bit of family law, but I don't do anything that's like domestic violence or anything like that. There are good attorneys who do that kind of stuff. So I've learned to just prioritize my time. That's my private time, my time as when I'm an attorney. And that has probably helped me keep my sanity for the most part, as well as I can.
So do you see this industry growing over the next few years as more people become involved in the industry?
I would hope that more young attorneys or even older attorneys would be interested, would want to be involved in the equine industry, because that's never going to go away. We're always going to have, there's, this human horse relationship that's just been with us forever. And the horses deserve good care and respect, as well as the people who do that work with them. Yeah, and eventually I'll be done with this, and hopefully there'll be somebody who will step up, and take my place. That's one reason why, when I realized early on, 16 years, actually it was 18 years ago, when I was looking around for equine attorneys to be a mentor to me, I could hardly find anybody. And so one of my missions, of many, one is to tell everybody, get everything in writing, educate people that's important. Handshakes just don't cut it anymore. And the other was, my other mission was to get more attorneys interested and involved in equine and agriculture issues, because they go hand in hand. And I helped found the agricultural law section of the Maryland State Bar Association. I was one of 2 women who did that. And we have a very successful section. And so I'm really proud of that accomplishment.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah, so it's, it's all what you put into it, what you're going to get out of it.
Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today.
Well, you're welcome. Thank you for asking me.